Folks, we've been doing these segments called Impressions of the Session in the 92nd General Assembly, and I know a day like today, these issues just seem so minuscule, but we're still going to get to it. We've got State Representative Jim Dotson is on the line. State Representative Jim Dotson, I know we want to get to the interview here in a minute, but do want to give you the opportunity to respond about this terrible news that people are mourning all across the state.
Morning, Paul. I would say it's good to be on, but on a morning like this, it's hard to use the word good. I don't know that I can comment on details of anything. I don't know them to comment on them, but it's just a tragic time, and our all of our thoughts and prayers are with the family and people that are closest in this situation, to just prayers for comfort and peace for them as they try to process last night and this morning, on what's happened and what's happening as it unfolds. I don't know how much more I can say about it. It's a tragedy.
It is. It's an absolute tragedy, and we will all get through it. I do know that much. Well, I do appreciate you coming on the program and to do that, especially in light of the circumstances. But let's just go ahead and give you the floor. I think you've done one of these before. So, State Representative Jim Dotson, what was your impression of the session 2019, sir?
Well, so every session has the good, the bad, the ugly, and probably how you categorize each and every bill within those depends on your individual lens and how you view government. My personal impression of the session, obviously comes from my perspective of the successes and failures of what I was working on. And overall, I probably had the most successful session I've had to date in the 4 regular sessions that I've been in office. I know it's often easy to focus on the turds, and this year there were some big stinky ones, especially in the area of taxation. From my viewpoint, there are 2 ways to spell tax: T-A-X and F-E-E. Sadly, both of them have the same effect, taking the hard-earned money out of the pockets of Arkansans and putting it under the control of the government. Although I've not added up all the new taxes and fees versus reductions, if you include the half-cent sales tax, if that gets extended, or not extended but made permanent, I would suspect that probably more money will be coming out of the pockets of Arkansans after the 92nd General Assembly than before, which is highly disappointing, especially since the 92nd General Assembly actually enacted some of the best tax policy overall in state history. But if I can, kind of like to focus on some of the successes from this session.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of which, your listeners may have not have heard about yet or be aware of. First of all, the National Motto Display Act, "In God We Trust," that we passed in 2017, further clarified and expanded on. And for those that may not be familiar with that, a couple of years ago we passed legislation that allowed folks to contribute our national motto, "In God We Trust," to be displayed in public buildings, and required those public buildings to put them up if they were contributed and donated. And that included all classrooms and libraries of elementary and secondary education buildings. Clarified that a little bit, because there's questions throughout the last couple of years on what had to be on the framed copy, if it had to be "In God We Trust" over a centered American flag or not, and those sorts of things. But also expanded the definition of classrooms and libraries to include institutions of higher education. So any public institution of higher education, people can donate our national motto, a framed copy of that too, and those institutions of higher education shall display those in their classrooms and libraries if they get them. So that was further clarified. A bill that I've worked on since I started in the legislature, and oftentimes we pass stuff or things fail, but a lot of times we don't realize that it's been worked on multiple sessions in a row. But we reduced the concealed carry fees from $100 for a new application to $50 for a new license, and then the renewals from $35 to $25. And, that's something I've worked on since I've been there. So at least 4 sessions trying to make that, that's a big win for Arkansans. Rules and regulatory reform. I had 3 different bills this session dealing with that. Prior to this session, Arkansas was the only state in the country that didn't have an online searchable database for citizens to easily access what type of regulatory compliance they're subject to in their business or personal lives. Also, every new state law that gets passed, state agencies have to write new rules to implement that law. And so sometimes it would take them years to write those new rules whenever they got around to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now, because of Act 517, not only will they be required to get the rules done by the 1st of January in the year after a session, but they'll also have to narrowly write the rules within the bounds of the statute that gave them authority to write those rules.
Yeah.
So no longer will they have broad bureaucratic interpretation authority when writing those rules,
mm-hmm.
which that's also, in my view, that's a big win as well.
Yeah. And we're talking with State Representative Jim Dotson. I know you have kind of I've watched some of your work in other meetings, that take place in between the legislative session, specifically on the appropriation process. I remember when you were trying to limit, what these bureaucracies were going to be, they shouldn't be given the authority to, be funded more than they need, and they were asking for these, ridiculous increases. And you really brought that to light, and I thought that was a good idea. In light of the 92nd General Assembly, I wonder if you were at all frustrated, because I see that you voted against the was it $95 million for the gas tax. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the gas tax increased 3 cents, 6 cents, and I wonder if you're all frustrated that there really didn't seem to be a conversation about finding that money, or at least a portion of that money that was desired from cuts somewhere else.
Well, I mean, every single bill you have to discuss on its own merits. So, there's always going to be challenges and frustrations. Like I said, that's part of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in my view, that was the ugly. But in some people's view, that was the good. So, like I said, it all depends on your perspective. But we did reduce some things. Like I said, concealed carry fees got reduced. But on the other hand, a whole bunch of other fees got increased. And so you have to fight these battles individually. And I know trying to hold spending in check has been something that I've been working on and focused on. But probably in light of that individual bill, there wasn't a conversation about it. But there have been other conversations about spending in general.
Yeah.
And so it's just the whole legislative sausage, if you will, has those good and bad points in it. And you can't always, you have to vote on individual bills, and you have to discuss the individual bills in front of you and vote them up or down. But on net, I think we probably made more over the last year, not just including this session, more of an awareness on spending than probably has happened in a long, long time.
Yeah.
I mean, just for instance, with regards to appropriations, this in the budget hearings that happened last fall, out of the billions and billions of dollars that we appropriate, which gives the agencies authority and quote unquote flexibility to spend, we reduced their overall appropriations by about $4.6 billion. And so we took a lot of agency discretion away on how they spend those dollars without having to come back and ask for permission.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we're making some progress. It's, I could always want more, but, sometimes you have to put these things in perspective. When I first started, we were overjoyed and ecstatic that we were able to reduce the top income tax rate by a tenth of a point, from 7% down to 6.9. Well, 6 years later, we were able to get it from 6.9 down to 5.9, a whole point, which, we sometimes underestimate how big a victory that truly is.
Yeah.
That's been at 7%, I think, since the early 70s. So taking it in light of the overall, we had some really major successes and some really frustrating setbacks in certain areas.
Well, and like you said, I think the overall tax structure, I mean, if that's all you're concerned about, then I think it was a win. But if you're worried about the people paying more money to the government than they were, that was a fail. I've got the DFNA numbers, and even without the half cent getting passed by the voters, it's still bad news. If that half cent comes in, it's a ridiculous amount of money. We're talking with State Representative Jim Dotson. Real quick, 2 years ago, last session, you were pushing very, very reasonable school choice legislation. I understand you weren't necessarily carrying that torch this time, but were you disappointed that we couldn't move the needle anymore on school choice?
Yeah, I mean, I've been frustrated and disappointed with that for obviously a couple of years. I think we did have some positives with regards to education in general. On school choice, that continues to be a challenge that, in states that I've looked at and studied across the nation, it really requires a strong leadership, a strong executive push oftentimes in order to get that type of stuff done and a priority set on that. Hopefully in the future we can get that early on in a session, because when that happens, those things get done on those contentious issues.
Yeah.
But it became clear, really on the first day of session when we saw how the committees were assigned, that we probably wouldn't have the votes to get anything through the House Education Committee, and so my focus and attention turned to the things that we could actually accomplish this session. In light of that, I think a really positive out of this session was that the House was able to change the committee selection process.
Yes.
Now the Speaker won't have complete authority over that, and we'll choose committees by seniority. And hopefully in future years that'll give us a little bit more of a opportunity. I don't know if we'll be any more successful, but it will give us more of an opportunity to consider that type of legislation.
I agree. That's true. That's true.
I don't know how much time you got left.
Well, we just got a little bit of time left, so go ahead.
A couple other things just to bring to your attention. We did a lot with procurement. So with regards to spending, we made some major changes in that to try to, based off of procurement study over the last couple of years. And so hopefully we will be able to hold that spending more in check with regards to procurement processes, and state purchasing. And, I'll skip over corporate tax reform, which we had some major positives in, as far as trying to get manufacturing capital investments and things like that into our state in the future. One thing that we did was, we're number one in teen pregnancy in the state, or the state of Arkansas in the nation is number one. And so we did some very positive things, in my view, of trying to focus on how do we get teens to avoid risk behaviors and give them the proper information that they need in order to make good choices for their health and their future and avoid that. That'll have cost-saving benefits, because most of those teen pregnancies are Medicaid births. So if we can help kids make better choices and avoid getting into situations that are going to be costly not only to them but also to taxpayers in the future, that's very good. And then finally, well, not finally, I mean, we've got several more to talk about, but historical documents in public schools, we gave some protections to teachers and local districts to be able to teach things like the Bill of Rights, the Northwest Ordinance, President Washington's farewell address, the Gettysburg Address, and things like that, without censorship or without any type of
because they don't want they talk about God and a higher power in a lot of those documents,
right?
And you don't want them to admit that in the classroom.
Exactly. Now we've given the teachers in the classroom the ability to teach those things. I mean, obviously they'd have to make that local decision themselves,
right?
But without having to edit those or be censored by their local authorities.
Yeah.
But we've also given them within it was House Bill 1747 the ability of local school districts to require, as part of, if they choose to, part of their graduation requirements and things like that, they can ensure public students understand limited government, liberty secured in the Bill of Rights, federalism, and other basic principles that are, essential to the stability and endurance of our constitutional republic. So I think we've given some tools. There were some really good positives in regards to that that are not often talked about. So.
State Representative Jim Dotson, I appreciate it, sir, from District 93. It's always great to have you on. Thanks for spending time with us and giving your impression of the session, sir.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right.
Have a good day.
Folks, we're going to be back in just a moment.